So let's first create the background. Press Ctrl plus J to duplicate the image. First convert it into smart filters and then select camera raw filter. Let's first decrease the temperature. -12. Then let's increase the tint around 60. Let's decrease the highlight to -10 and increase the shadows. Also decrease the whites around -15 and increase the black around 20. And decrease the clarity around -10. Now select split toning. In highlights, increase the saturation. Let's keep it 59 and hue to 0. And in shadows, increase the saturation to 50. And let's increase the hue, say around 270. Now take a rectangular marquee tool and select from the end of the pole till above. Press Ctrl plus J to duplicate this area. And let's apply motion blur to it. Go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. Angle 90 degree and distance 150 pixels. So this is our background. Drag the image in our file. Change the blend mode to screen. And let's place this around this building. So I'm gonna name it Technology because all these characters are like technology type. Let's press Ctrl plus T. Let's decrease the size first and use distort to place it. Try to place it like 90 degree. Okay, this looks fine. Now we also want some reflection of it below. So duplicate the image. Flip it vertically. Hold shift and drag it down. Let's rotate a bit. Now add a layer mask and clear the pixels which are visible on this road. Opacity 100%. Let's apply some motion blur to the reflection. Go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. Let's decrease the distance to 100 pixels. Let's make it 80. Now let's clear the sharp edges. So select the technology layer, press B for brush tool, soft round. Also decrease the opacity around 50%. Let's increase to 60. Also the below end. Now let's place another image. The light one. Drag in our file. I'm gonna name it light. Change the blend mode to luminosity. Place it between these two buildings. Let's drag it down a little. First add a layer mask and clear the sharp edges. Opacity to 100%. Also clear the pixels around this pole. So let's increase the hardness of the brush around 70. Hold shift and drag it down. Let's apply curves. Select clipping mask and drag the mid-tone handle up. Now let's place this X. Select it using rectangular marquee tool. Drag in a file. Change the blend mode to screen and add levels to remove the background. Select clipping mask and drag the shadow handle. Around 90. Now let's place this on the black strip which is visible. Decrease the size, rotate it. Also use distort. Let's place it down a bit. And let's add some motion blur to it. Go to filter, blur, motion blur. And let's increase the distance to 100 pixels. Now let's place some another lights. So let's drag this in a file. Change the blend mode to lighten. Press Ctrl plus T to rotate and adjust it. Also we need the reflection of this, so duplicate it and flip it vertically. Hold shift and drag it down. Let's rotate it. Also add a layer mask and clear the below pixels. Let's add some motion blur and Gaussian blur to it. Let's increase the distance to 200 pixels. And let's apply a Gaussian blur of 10 pixels. Let's drag it down a little more. Now let's place some text. Change the blend mode to color dodge and add levels to remove the background which is visible. Around 39. Shadow handle 39. Press Ctrl plus D. Decrease the size and place it on the spool. Let's place another text. Drag in our file. Change the blend mode to screen and also add levels to remove the background which is visible. Shadow handle to 60. Press Ctrl plus T. Let's place it around here. Decrease the size a bit. Add a layer mask and clear the pixels which are visible here. And let's add our last text. Select using rectangular marquee tool or any other tool. Drag in our file. Change the blend mode to screen. Also add levels to remove the background. Shadow handle 37. And let's place this on the top of this building. So we need to use distort for that. Let's use skew to drag this part below. This looks fine. So now let's place our character. Select the man using pen tool. Convert the part into selection and drag in our file. Let's increase the size. Now let's first add gradient to it. Go to adjustment, gradient. Select the foreground to background preset. Change the foreground color to E700FF and change the background color to 1000FF. Press OK. Change the angle to 0. Clip it to the man and change the blending mode to multiply. Now let's add some shadow. Duplicate the man layer. Select the pixels of the man. Right click on the layer button and fill the selection with black color. Press Ctrl plus T, right click, select distort and let's flip it. Make sure the feet are touching. Now let's add some Gaussian blur to it. Go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur and increase the radius to 30 pixels. Let's add one more shadow. Near the foot, it should be a little dark. So change the foreground color to black and just brush over. Let's add Gaussian blur effect to this also. Radius to 10 pixels. Add a new layer between man and the gradient one. Add a new layer between man and the gradient one. Foreground color to black and brush near the end of the feet. Now add a new layer above gradient and clip it. Change the foreground color to E700FF. Change the blend mode to screen. Decrease the opacity around 60% and let's just tap on the left side. Also on this side a little. Now add a layer mask to clear this pixels. Now let's apply some Gaussian blur to it. 30 pixels. Let's decrease the opacity. Let's clear some of the effect on this side. Now let's add a new layer. Clip it. This time change the foreground color to 1000FF. Change the blend mode to screen. Brush opacity 60% and dab on the right side. Also apply the same 30 pixels Gaussian blur. Now let's select this torch. Press Ctrl plus J to duplicate it. And let's drag it at the top. Let's clip all the layers again to the man. And let's apply inner and outer glow of white color. Select white, blend mode screen, increase the opacity around 60% and also the size. T5, 42. And also inner glow, color white, blend mode normal, opacity 100 and size 250. Now let's apply its reflection below. Add a new layer above. Change the foreground color to white. Press B for brush tool. Change the blend mode to soft light. Increase the size of the brush and just click once. Press Ctrl plus D and resize it. Duplicate the layer. Now clear the gradient effect on this foot. Now to give a final touch, select the top layer, select levels. Let's drag the shadow handle in around 7 and also the highlight handle to 245. Let's blend this light a little proper. I'll increase the size a bit more. Let's bring these pixels back. Let's clear the pixels from here. Now let's clear the pixels visible here too. Let's decrease the opacity of the shadow. %70, and the one which we created close to the foot, let's make it 80%. Let's make this 80% too.